Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 2 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Recruitment. Welcome to Xavier's Institute for the Gifted. Clark smiled as he opened the door of the limousine and offered a hand to May Parker, a hand which she accepted with a smile. As she paused to look round, Peter climbed out the other side. Nice place, he noted, and Clark laughed. Indeed. The lorry will be here soon. We've set aside a small apartment for you just next to my mother's, Mrs. Parker. You may as well call me Aunt May, came the smiling reply. Mrs. Parker makes me feel old. You know that some of the furniture is, quite. Clark looked down at her and she sighed as Peter walked past with several fully packed suitcases. I forgot that you were Superman for a minute, she admitted with a wry smile. Peter being Spider-Man is quite an adjustment by itself. Between the two of you, I'm sure you won't have any trouble. Oh, we'll probably hook Colossus and Sunspot in to help as well. Clark grinned. Piotr can transform into a living metal statue while Roberto uses solar energy to amplify his strength. Both are almost perfect for moving heavy stuff around. I'll help too, cousin. Kara grinned as she landed next to them. Kara Kent, also known as Supergirl. Pleased to meet you, Aunt May. May stared at her in surprise. How did you know? We Kryptonians have very good hearing. She giggled. The lorry's on its way. I saw it coming over the hill and it should be here in a few more minutes. Should I round up the others to help? Only if they're willing to. Clark confirmed and Kara flew towards the mansion. If it's all right with you, we'll wait until we've got you settled in before introducing you to everyone. Clark offered and May nodded. That would be good, thank you. All right, everybody, Xavier announced, and the conversations in the dining room faded away as everyone turned their attention to him. Before we begin, there's a couple of announcements I'd like to make. First, Scott's classmate Paul and Jean's friend Taryn will be visiting tomorrow, so we will be in a no-powers state until they leave. Ronnie, you may want to decide before they arrive if you'd prefer to be on 2 legs, or 4. Ronnie nodded with a wry smile as several of the others hastily muffled their laughter while Peter and May swapped confused looks. Secondly, we have gained 2 new additions, Peter Parker and his aunt, May Parker. Peter, May? Would either of you like to say a few words? Peter stood up and looked around. I'm Peter Parker, also known as Spider-Man. Before I came here, I was also a part-time web page designer. Do you make your own webs like spiders do? Jubilee asked, and Peter shook his head. No, they're liquid polymers stored in high-pressure ampoules that react with air to form strands of differing properties based on minor adjustments in the formulae. I wear them on my wrists. Groovy, you're another tech head like me, a voice said, and Peter looked at the speaker. Name's Forge, they call me the resident egghead. What say we upgrade your web shooters with K-Tech once we've eaten? Maybe get you a new suit as well. Peter shot a glance at Xavier, who nodded. That would be great. Thanks. As Peter sat down, May rose. My name is May Parker, but you can call me Aunt May. Like Martha, I'm not a mutant and have no special powers, but I have accepted a position on the staff. May sat down to a round of applause and Xavier looked at Martha. All right, everyone. She smiled. Dig in. Hey, Scott said as he walked into the area jokingly referred to as the Geek's Lair. How are you guys doing? Great, Spider-Man replied, dropping down from the ceiling and causing Scott to leap backwards in shock before glaring at him. This outfit is amazing. Looks interesting, Scott admitted as Peter somersaulted backwards, firing 2 strands of webbing and using them to ascend to the ceiling again. Forge. Spider-Man's outfit is a modified K-Tech bodysuit. Forge began. The main changes are the pattern, which was copied from his old outfit and upgraded slightly, while the gloves and solace of his boots have been made thinner to allow use of his powers. His lenses now contain the standard HUD interfaces and his mask and hood contain standard comm systems. His web shooters have been upgraded to allow in situ modification of the webbing and the reservoirs have been increased 300%. Basically, it rocks. Peter finished, dropping down again and pulling his mask off his head to reveal his grin. This tech is so damn cool, I never dreamed I could have access to stuff like this. Yeah, it is cool. Scott grinned, then he sobered. How is Project Shutdown doing? Still no progress. Forge admitted. I can't find any way to temporarily deactivate a mutant's powers once active. Really? Peter asked, walking over. Can I see what you've come up with so far? Sure. Forge shrugged, tapping several commands into the computer. Maybe a new mind will see something I've missed. So, Scott, what's up? Just checking in. Scott said, then he grinned. It's been a while since you upgraded my visor. It's pretty close to perfect as it is. Forge grinned back. So unless your power changes, I think it can be left as is for now. Scott laughed, then his eyes noticed something. Wow, nice symbol. Peter looked up, then he glanced at the icon adorning his shoulder. Oh, that. Well, I asked Clark and Xavier for permission to mix their symbols and came up with this. All I really did was replace the top quarter of the circle with the House of L logo, but I think that it works. I've got to talk to them about updating our logos to that. Scott said reverently. Mrs. Parker. Xavier said in greeting as he looked round appreciatively. The library has never been neater. Thank you. May smiled as she placed another book neatly on the shelf. I took the liberty of putting them in order, they had started to be mixed up quite badly. And as I said before, call me May. Xavier allowed his gaze to take in the room. It was obvious where May had reached in her tidying and his smile increased slightly. A thought occurs to me, he said, catching her gaze. As Martha is our official chef, would you be interested in becoming our archivist? Several of the youngsters are having trouble with their school projects, perhaps you could recommend which reference books they might be best using. Archivist. May mused, then she smiled as she slotted another book into its correct place. I'd be happy to. I used to work as a librarian when I was younger, but there are quite a few books that I'd recommend adding to this lot. As long as they aren't gold-plated or autographed first editions, I do not see the problem. Xavier joked and May giggled slightly. Autographed? Like the Mills and Boone in the back section. Xavier face-palmed. Damn it, Logan. Why do you do this to me? He muttered, causing May to raise a quizzical eyebrow. Nick Fury stood outside the empty house staring at the for sale sign in the yard, then he sighed and turned to the man who was accompanying him. Did you know about this, Stark? Nope. Tony replied, his normal smirk in abeyance. I checked 3 days ago, there was absolutely no sign of anything changing. Can I help you gentlemen? A woman asked from the next house across and Tony walked to her gate, a friendly smile on his face. I would be most thankful if you could. Tony said, capturing the woman's hand and bowing to kiss it, eliciting a blushing smile from her. You see, your neighbor Peter Parker recently won a competition run by Stark Industries and I came personally to inform him of it, but he seems to have vanished. Really? The woman asked. He and his aunt left yesterday after some people visited them the day before. I think one was a bald guy in a wheelchair. Xavier. Fury sighed, rubbing his forehead. I hadn't realized that, never mind. Thank you for helping us, Tony purred, kissing the woman's hand again. My apologies for taking up your time. Not at all. She replied breathlessly as Fury stalked towards the parked car and Tony followed him, turning to blow a kiss at her. Once inside the car, he pulled out a small smartphone and started tapping at the screen. Back to base. Fury commanded the agent at the wheel, then he sighed. I thought Spider-Man was an enhancel, not a mutant. He is an enhancel, the blood sample proves it. Tony countered. Then again, we know that Xavier isn't limiting himself to collecting other mutants. He would have been a good addition to the Avengers Initiative. Fury sighed, leaning back in his seat. Nowhere near a Kryptonian, of course, but a welcome addition. We could ask Steve to go on a recruiting run to the mansion. Tony suggested. Maybe convince young Peter to join us if he's there. Good idea. Fury nodded. Any idea where Cap is? He's probably at the tower. Tony mused. He said something about trying out the new gym I had installed last week after Thor accidentally broke the previous one. This one should even let Superman work up a sweat. Fury nodded in appreciation. Maybe we can use that to persuade him to switch from ally to Avenger. I think it may take more than that. Tony countered. You forget, Superman's a lot like Steve, only with more powers. Once a man like that gets a cause to champion, he doesn't let it go. And it's only the fact that he is like Cap that keeps me from placing him in the threat category. Fury admitted. Although that female Kryptonian is still an unknown. Wow, what a place. Paul breathed as Scott drove them in through the main gates. In the rear seat, Taryn was looking around so fast that Scott almost suspected her of being a speedster-type mutant. Welcome to the Xavier Institute for the Gifted, Scott said as he swung the car round and parked it at the front of the mansion. Hey, Peter. Where's Clark? He got called away. Peter replied as he stood up from the steps in front of the main door. I assume that these are Paul and Taryn. Paul shook hands even as he glanced at Scott. Peter joined us yesterday, his aunt's a member of the faculty here, in charge of the library and all things stationery related. Scott explained. He used to have a part-time job as a web designer. I'm still redesigning the Institute's web page. Peter smiled. The hardest part is striking the balance between making the page stand out and streamlining it enough that it loads within a few seconds or less. He's one of our geeks, Scott added, and both Paul and Taryn struggled not to laugh as Peter glared at the glasses-wearing teen. Anyway, Peter said after a moment. Most of the others are hanging round the pool or playing basketball, so Xavier suggested that you give your friends a quick tour and join us out there. Martha made some snacks. Okay, come on. Scott chivied his two guests in through the door. If Martha made snacks, we need to get out there as fast as possible before they all vanish. Peter laughed as the trio entered the mansion, then he jogged round the mansion towards the pool. The chance to see some of the girls in bathing suits was too much to risk passing up. Okay, you both got everything? Scott asked as Paul and Taryn, walking slowly due to the effects of a larger-than-normal Martha Kent dinner, finally reached the car. Hold on. Paul said, quickly patting his pockets. Yup, I'm good. Excellent. Scott said, glancing at Taryn, who also nodded. So, if you'll just, what? Scott blinked as a motorcyclist riding a classic bike pulled in. The man kicked the stand into position, clambered off his bike and removed his helmet to reveal familiar blonde hair. Captain America. Paul gasped and Steve Rogers grinned at them. Hi Psych. Good to see you again. Fury sent me to talk to Peter and Clark about offering Peter a slot on the Avengers. Is Peter here? Scott rubbed his forehead, then half-turned to see Paul and Taryn staring at him in shock. Oh hell. Steve, you may as well head in. Clark's away at the moment. I know, I saw him on the news helping to deal with that refinery fire by flying an old water tower over it and tipping the water onto the flames. Steve nodded and Scott's incipient headache started to materialize. Damn it, Steve. Paul, Taryn, I really think you need to speak to the professor now. Ah. Steve stated as realization dawned. They're not students here, are they? Sorry. Wow. Paul gasped. Why didn't you tell me you were Cyclops? Clark is Superman. Taryn realized. Whoa, cool. Right. Scott stated, turning and re-entering the mansion. Come on, time for you all to speak to the professor. Chapter 12, Investigation. You are scary. Steve stated as he watched Scott drive off to deposit Paul and Taryn back to their homes. Erasing their memories like that. It isn't something that I enjoy doing, and I wouldn't have had they not reacted so badly to the knowledge that most here are mutants. Xavier sighed as he turned away from the window. In fact, I hate doing things like that, but I have to protect my students. The public isn't ready to learn about mutant kind yet. The presence of enhanced humans like yourself still worries many of them. Steve shrugged. I think that it'll work out better than you think, but I can see why you want to put off the moment of revelation for as long as possible. Indeed. For as long as they believe that there are only a small number of those with powers, and that the powers come from science or magic, they will be reassured by the thought that there is a chance that they could have powers as well. Xavier mused as he parked behind his desk. But mutants, born with the powers that manifest while they are still young, powers that cannot be explained or copied, the very thought would terrify people. I think you are wrong, but I agree that keeping things quiet would help, Steve said as he walked over and sat down. However, I was sent to. A knock on the door interrupted them and Steve turned as the door opened. His eyes widened as a beautiful blonde in an outfit that slightly resembled Superman's entered. Ah, Kara. Xavier smiled. I see you have returned. Did it go well? Yep. Kara chirped. One runaway train stopped without any casualties. Hi, I'm Kara, also known as Supergirl. Steve managed to say. Are you Clark's cousin? Kara nodded. And you are? Kara Kent, meet Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America. Steve, this is Kara, a valued colleague and student here. Steve blinked a few times, then shook his head. Sorry, I lost my concentration for a moment. Peter wanted me to tell you that he hitched a lift from Storm and they're patrolling Manhattan tonight. Kara added and Steve sighed. Bother. I was hoping I could offer him a place amongst the Avengers. Kara looked at him curiously. Are you the same Steve that Logan tells all those stories about? Crazy Canuck. Steve muttered with fond irritation, then he nodded. Logan and I fought alongside each other in World War II before my enhancements started to degrade. It was your cousin who brought me, hold on. Reaching into his jacket pocket, Steve pulled out a beeping phone and activated it. Yes. Xavier raised an eyebrow as Steve paled and closed the phone. I need to go. I need to get to Utah as fast as I can. Kara mused. Clark's got the Javelin and Storm took the Blackbird. If you want, I can carry you in a passenger pod. I can hit Mach 3 easy. Steve stared at her, then he nodded almost robotically. Great. Let's go. The blonde-haired captain stared at the new arrival as she unslung a coffin-sized crystalline container from her back and placed it upright on the ground. A moment later, the container opened and a familiar figure stepped out. Captain. Captain. Steve grinned back, then he saw the taller blonde staring at the one who had brought him there. Clay, this is Supergirl, Superman's cousin. She volunteered to tag along to see what was going on. Supergirl, meet Captain Clay Quartermain, the commanding officer of the second iteration of Howling Commandos. Clay, where are the others? Still searching. Clay said, that he caught Supergirl's quizzical look. She cleared for this. Same as Superman. Steve replied and Clay nodded, then gestured at the wrecked buildings before them. This used to be one of the S.H.I.E.L.D. satellite bases. It was used to store outdated technology that might prove useful. The equipment that gave Cap his powers was stored here in the hopes that the deficiencies in the upgrade process could be identified and countered. Basically, it made me strong, but it didn't take properly and I would have died if I hadn't been frozen and then healed by your cousin. Steve interjected. Whoever it was, they went through the guards here almost like an angry football team through a Congo line of tofu-eating environmentalists. Clay continued, ignoring the giggle from Supergirl at the comparison. Most of the attackers seemed to have powers and 2 of them have been positively identified as being former members of the Acolytes of Magneto. The youngest was a speedster, we suspect it was the one known as Quicksilver, but it was moving too fast for a positive identification. Oh hell. Steve growled. Magneto stole the equipment that gave me my abilities. Highly probable. Clay agreed. Several other items were taken as well, but they took everything relating to Project Rebirth, files, prototypes, everything. I assume that this is bad news. Supergirl asked and Steve nodded. Last time Magneto got hold of something that he thought could transform normal humans into mutants, he almost wiped out all life on the planet trying to use it. If he tries something similar with this, that would be bad. Supergirl agreed. Do you want me to ask the professor to scan for any clue as to Magneto's whereabouts? Or we could ask Mystique. Steve blinked a few times, then nodded slowly. That might work. She would almost certainly have a reason to keep track of her former employer. Clay nodded, then he frowned. Hey, Cap. I thought you were trying to recruit that spider kid for your group. Steve sent a pointed glance at the ruins before them and Clay nodded. Yeah, you're right. This is way more important. You have to be kidding me. Mystique growled in exasperation. Eric's trying again. It's the only explanation we can come up with at this time, ma'am. Steve said calmly and Mystique sighed. Standing up, she walked over to a door and opened it, revealing stairs heading down. I keep my records in the basement. She explained, motioning for the duo to follow her. I noted down everything that I knew about Eric's plans and allies, then Clark let me link to his system. Steve looked round, his eyes widening as the plastered walls gave way to walls of metal panels and glowing crystalline pillars. The staircase opened up into the upper level, a large, circular chamber, and Mystique pointed at the large doors around the edge as she led them to one of the curved stairs that connected the balcony they were on to the lower level. That door leads to Xavier's place, that one to the sanctuary dome. Those two doors are escape tunnels should we be attacked by overwhelming force. Now, down here we have our own danger room, a med bay with a lift connecting it to the small one in the cottage, several storage rooms, my quarters, a few other rooms and my study. Come in. Steve blinked. He had expected to see shelving units and filing cabinets plus all the other paraphernalia of a study, but this study was a 9-meter-wide cylindrical room with a 3/4 arc desk in the middle, a desk mounted at the end of the projecting triangle of flooring. Interesting design. He noted as he stopped by the metal desk and glanced down at the 3-meter drop to the lowest part of the room. Mystique smirked as she sat down and waved her hand over the smooth metal, and Steve's eyes widened as the metal seemed to flow upwards slightly, changing color as it formed a keyboard. Even as it did so, the walls of the chamber glowed and icons started to appear. That is a big screen. Steve managed, and Mystique smirked again, her fingers flying over the keyboard and the touchpad adjacent to it. The icons moved away from the middle as a large map of the Earth appeared, and then several red helmet icons started to flash on it. These are the locations of Magneto's bases that I am aware of. Mystique said, and several icons were suddenly encased in circles. Those are the bases that Eric knows that I know about, but my paranoia made me break into his files. Now, based on what you have said and what Eric knows that I know, that would mean that these 5 bases are the most likely. Australia, Madagascar, Genosha, Ireland, and Canada. Here are their locations. A sheet of paper scrolled out of a small slot that Steve would have been willing to swear hadn't been there several seconds ago, and Mystique passed it to him. Addresses and coordinates. I'll ask Fury to dispatch some task forces. I'm fairly certain that he'll send his commandos to the Canada one, but I'm not sure about the others. MI-13 will probably deal with the one in Ireland. MI-13. Kara queried, and Steve shrugged. I worked alongside them for a while in World War II, they're kind of the United Kingdom version of S.H.I.E.L.D., but older. They were created in the war to counter Hitler's use of superhumans and Chinooks. They got in contact with me once I was revived. 2 targeted, 3 left. Mystique noted. I'll ask my cousin to take a team to check one of them out as well. Kara suggested, and Steve nodded. Before we continue, I need to check in with Fury and find out what he can do. You can use my phone, if you want. Mystique said, and Steve stared at the silvery rotary phone just by his hand. Where did that come from? We're taking Genosha. Steve stated to Kara as he put the phone down. Superman's taking a group to Australia using the Javelin, MI-13 is sending Captain Britain and his team to check out the one in Ireland, and S.H.I.E.L.D. has the other 2, the Commandos to Canada, and Tony's leading the other Avengers to check out Madagascar. Do you want to join us, Mystique? Thank you, but no. Mystique said with a slight grimace. Eric wants me dead, so I need to keep a very low profile. Fighting my way through one of his bases does not meet that criteria. Of course. Steve said. I understand perfectly, thank you for helping us this much. Won't it put you in danger, giving us this information? Kara asked, and Mystique smirked. No, Eric doesn't know that I know about those bases, and since he knows that I don't have any links to MI-13, He will probably assume that one of his followers chose to betray him to them and they called in the others. It isn't the first time that it has happened, after all. Then we should get going. Steve said. Thank you again. Kara. Happy to help. Kara chirped, pulling Mystique into a quick hug. Steve's eyebrows rose as he heard her whisper. Clark likes you, but if you ever hurt him. Mystique swallowed as Kara released her. Shall we? Steve asked, motioning towards the door, and Kara nodded. As they left, Steve gave the nervous mutant an apologetic look and a reassuring smile before hurrying after the blonde Kryptonian. Did you have to do that to her? He asked, and Kara blushed slightly. Sorry, it's just. I changed Cal's nappies when he was a baby and then suddenly I was on Earth and he was all grown up. I guess I'm still trying to big sister him. Must be hard. Steve noted and Kara nodded. Yes, it is. I mean, it's great having a new world with loads of plants and millions of people and new mountains and valleys and so on to explore, but at the same time, I miss Krypton and there's so much at the Institute that reminds me of it. It's hard to try and fit in at times. I know how you feel. Steve admitted as they reached the passenger container. I missed 70 years and most of my friends passed away while I was frozen. If I hadn't joined the Avengers, I don't know what I would have done. Chapter 13, Down Under. Scott carefully scanned the horizon as he adjusted course, the javelin responding smoothly. To his left, Clark leaned back in his chair, his relaxation a reassuring testament to how he was doing. A beep caught Scott's attention and he tapped the COMM. Cyclops here. Scott, something interesting has just occurred. Xavier's voice said. A new mutant with powers remarkably similar to yours has just manifested his powers in Middleton Beach, barely 20 kilometers south of Magneto's base. Interesting. Wolverine mused from his seat at the back of the cockpit. I suggest that after we hit the base, Psyche and Jean take the bikes and check it out while the rest of us check for clues. If something goes wrong, Flyboy can be there in seconds. Sounds like plan. Colossus agreed. All in favor? I'm in. Jean smiled and Stom nodded. I'll set Cerebro to monitor the mutant and uplink his location to your communicators, then. Xavier replied. Good luck. Scott deactivated the comm and glanced round. Well, looks like this is a twofer. A chance to strike at Magneto and get a new recruit. Again. Colossus chuckled and several of the others smiled at the reference. By the way, Scott asked, when are you going to upgrade the Javelin's cockpit like you did with the Blackbird? Jean looked puzzled at that. Flyboy replaced the viewports on the Blackbird so that Psyche could eye-blast through them without actually damaging them. Logan explained. I'm still fabricating the new panels. Clark shrugged. They take a while to create, even with my tech. Ah, looks like the scanners are picking something up. Clark leaned forwards and his hands briefly blurred over the controls, causing several holographic screens to appear with data streaming down them. There's something there, all right, but it looks like it's deserted. Scott, land us on the southern side, half a click from the target, then like you get the fun job of recruiting whoever that new mutant is. I never been here before. Colossus rumbled. Been in Russia, Ireland, and asteroid. Scanning complete, no life signs. Clark stated as the Javelin settled on its landing wheels. Good flying, Scott. You and Jean change into casuals and unload the bikes. Storm, the base might be trapped and you can't take the damage that us three can, so. I'm on comm duty and backup. Storm nodded. I understand. Clark nodded as he rose from his seat. All right, we have our missions, let's move. The roar of the motorbikes faded into the background as Superman flew towards the abandoned base with Logan and Piotr holding onto his wrists. A small, innocuous bungalow soon appeared amidst the trees and Superman set his two colleagues down just beyond the boundary as he surveyed the area. Several pressure pads set on the main path and under the windows. The let's go in through the wall. Logan smirked, his claws unsheathing with a snicked. Electrified and alarmed. Clark countered as he carefully moved forwards through the unmown grass. Instead, I think that we should go down. Colossus and Wolverine exchanged looks of incomprehension, and then their eyes widened as Clark lifted slightly into the air and started spinning, turning into a red and blue blur which then descended, sending clods of earth and high-velocity stones into the air. Logan instantly ducked behind Colossus as the flying debris bounced off the swearing taller man's metallic body. After an incredibly long moment or two, the debris fountain faltered and stopped as a familiar figure floated back up to ground level. "Damn it, Flyboy, a little warning next time." Logan growled and Clark shrugged apologetically. "Sorry, last time I did that was to dig a well at the farm. I kind of forgot about the side effects." Colossus shook his head and walked over to look down the newly dug shaft. "So, how we do this? I go first and catch you." Clark grinned, dropping down. Colossus and Logan stared at each other, then Colossus shrugged. "No one live forever." Logan watched the silvery man slide down into the blackness, then he sighed. "Ah hell. Watch out below, I'm coming down." "Nice place," Gene noted, looking round appreciatively. "Where's our target?" "That way." Scott pointed, then he smiled at her quizzical expression. "Upgraded glasses, I now have an HUD in them. Our target is 114 meters away." Jean nodded as she clambered off her bike, noting with a slight twinge of jealousy and another emotion that she refused to recognize that Scott had dismounted smoothly and gracefully, almost as if he were dancing. "So, shall we?" Scott nodded and strode off. Jean followed and shook her head when she realized that her eyes had wandered to his butt. "There, the blonde with the surfboard." Jean looked up and her eyes widened at the sight of the board that the teenager was showing his friends. The aft of the board had a chunk taken out of it, a chunk looking suspiciously like. "And I punched the shark on the nose and it fled." The teen finished. "You'd better spread the word, until that thing is caught, surfing's a no-go." "Why the hell does he look so familiar?" Scott grumbled as the two of them started towards the surfer. "Damn, it's dark." Logan grumbled as a pair of hands caught him and slowed him enough that he landed easily. "Colossus, you said you've never been here before." "No, but Magneto make bases similar." Colossus rumbled, his metal skin glinting as he swung his torch round. "Control room being that way. No code to start up and open up. Magneto has probably cancelled your code." Clark started, then he stopped as Colossus chuckled. "Said I know code. Not say is my code. Is code of Techmage. I don't think that he was one of the ones captured." Superman mused, then he nodded. "All right, let's do it. Power up the base, open it up and look round." Colossus paused as they reached an intersection, his torch playing over several signs inset in the wall. "Wait, we go that way? Must have been a big shark," Scott said as he got close to the blonde surfer who was walking away from the other teens. The boy looked round and grinned. "Yup, but one punch and it was swimming away as fast as it could." "Pow. This is Jean Grey and I'm Scott Summers." Scott continued and the teen's eyes widened. "Scotty." Scott froze for a second, then he managed to whisper a name. "Alex." Alex nodded and Jean blinked as the two young men seemed to teleport into a hug. What's going on?" "Jean, this is my little brother, Alex," Scott exclaimed. I thought you'd died in the plane crash that killed Mom and Dad." "I thought you'd died," Alex replied, tears trickling down his cheeks. "I saw your parachute catch fire, how did you?" "My mutant power activated," Scott said quietly. "I can fire kinetic blasts from my eyes." "Way cool." Alex grinned. "I fire them from my hands." "At least you can turn yours off." Scott shrugged, "I need these glasses to stop myself from accidentally destroying everything around me. I have a visor that lets me release it at will." "Whoa!" Alex gasped in realization. "You're Cyclops. That is, like, so awesome. Do you know Superman? I can take you to meet him if you want." Scott laughed, giving his brother another hug. "He's only a few dozen kilometers north, checking something out, along with 3 others from where I live. It's a special place run by Professor Charles Xavier. He's a cool dude and Superman's mom makes the best damned cookies you'll ever taste." Sounds cool. Alex enthused, then he paused. Although, I don't know what Dad'll say. Dad? Scott asked and Alex shrugged. Yeah, he adopted me soon after I was found, before we moved here. Of course, we're moving to Hawaii soon because of his job. I'm Alex Masters now. Hey, he could adopt you if you want. Scott laughed. Thanks, but no. I'm happy with my current surname, but I'd like to meet him. Where is he? I'd like to thank him and maybe explain about your powers. Last I saw, he was headed out to get some groceries. Alex said. My Jeep's over there. We have bikes, we'll follow you. Scott said and Alex nodded. Sure thing. Storm leaned back in her chair with a smile, then the comm system beeped and she reached out to toggle it. Storm here. Any news? Xavier asked and Storm grinned. Jean reported in. The mutant is one Alex Masters, formerly Alex Summers, Scott's long-lost brother. She said and she could almost hear Xavier's eyebrows rising at that. His powers are kinetic blasts from his hands similar to Scott's eye-beams. He sounds like he could be quite an asset to the Institute. Xavier said after a thoughtful silence and Storm nodded. Scott mentioned that Alex seems to idolize Clark somewhat, so having them meet might be the best way to recruit him. And how is Clark's group doing? They've managed to power up the base and have already started to upload all the data to the fortress. Storm said, glancing at a rising waterfall graphic showing how much data had already been uploaded to the Javelin and from there to the fortress. Colossus was able to bypass the security by using TechMag's code to log in on. I'm not sure how he knew that code, but it worked. While it isn't the one that Magneto's using. Any word from the other teams? Fury has contacted me, apparently the Canada site is also abandoned. They are searching for any evidence left behind. Xavier said. According to their locator beacon, Supergirl and Captain America have reached Genosha while the Avengers reported that the Madagascar site was active. As of this time, Captain Britain's task force has yet to report in. So, Madagascar was the true location. Storm mused. Magneto must be panicking, seeing Thor and Hulk charging at him again. Well, I'll contact you when we have more information here. Understood, Storm. Xavier out. And we're done. Logan said as the screen on the datapad plugged into the base's mainframe chimed to indicate that all of the data had been copied and uplinked. Flyboy, you heard. I'm already on my way back. Clark replied. There really wasn't that much here. Clark, Storm here. A new voice said. Scott and Jean are returning with our newest possible recruit. Scott asks that you come and say hello. I'll be there once we've cleared the base. Clark sent. Logan looked round as Clark flew into the room. We're packing up now. Colossus took his cue and picked up the datapad, unplugging it and storing it in its carry case before winding up the wire. All done. We go. We go. Logan nodded. Cool plane. Alex exclaimed as the silver plane came into sight. Scott leaned forwards as George Masters whistled. That's the Javelin, it's capable of going into space. I'm fully checked out as a pilot on it and if you choose to join us, I'll probably be the one flying us all back. Indeed you will. It's good practice. A new voice said and Alex's head snapped upwards, seeing Superman grinning down at him. Whoa. If you'll park just over there, we can talk. Clark said and Alex watched him accelerate ahead and land by the plane. George pulled up and climbed out of the Jeep. That is a nice plane. It's what you used on that mission to repair the space station, isn't it? It is, Clark nodded, although I've upgraded it a lot since then. George nodded and looked round as Alex scrambled into the plane for a closer look. Scott said that you teach at this institute. Is that right? I do, although I'm more of a mentor than a teacher. Clark said. I mainly help with training and occasionally lead missions, although Scott leads them whenever he deploys, with me acting as backup. Sounds like you're training him to be a leader. George noted and Superman nodded. I am. I know it sounds like boasting, but I'm currently one of the most powerful people around, although I can only be in one place at a time. I'm helping to train new teams, helping them to learn to control their powers, extend them and figure out new ways of using them. Like Scott and his visor, for instance. The upgrades to it let him select how he wishes to use his beams, the ratio of kinetic to thermal energy. It even gives him a constant HUD and active targeting to boost his accuracy. Several others have had their powers augmented in similar ways while all are receiving training. How to use their powers, when to use them, when to not use them, the morality of power. One of our newest recruits said it best. With great power comes great responsibility. I help teach them to be responsible. George nodded thoughtfully. I see. I think that I'd better see this institute before I give Alex my support for his decision. Chapter 14, Genosha. Steve stepped out of the travel pod and looked round curiously. So this is Genosha. He mused. Odd, I expected. I had heard that it was in the middle of a civil war. Carol looked at the buildings in the distance, then her gaze flickered round. I'm not seeing any signs of recent combat, she admitted. I can see a pair of tanks that have been crushed and their barrels twisted into a knot, but the people that I can see are generally happy and relaxed. Interesting. Steve mused. I wonder if... His voice trailed off as a purple flash of light erupted, coalescing into two figures. The smaller was a purple-skinned woman who darted behind the larger one, and Steve inhaled sharply. Juggernaut. The enormous armored man stared at them for a moment, then his scowl vanished as he grinned. Captain America. What are you doing here? Did you come for a rematch? We're investigating one of Magneto's bases, it's located nearby. Kara said, stepping forwards. I'm Supergirl, I believe that you have already met my cousin. Juggernaut whistled, then he reached up and started to unlatch his helmet. Oh yeah. Strong dude, I'd hate to have to go up against him. He's the one who had me sent here. Blink, can you send this back to the throne room? The purple woman nodded as she accepted the dome-shaped helmet, and an instant later, it vanished in another purple flash. Anyway. Marco Kane continued. Welcome to Genosha and, wait. Did you say Magneto has a base here? He does. Steve confirmed and Marco growled. Why that arrogant, no good son of a... How dare he? I told him I didn't want him on my island. Your island? Marco paused, then he sighed as Blink stepped forwards. May I introduce the elected monarch of the island of Genosha, warlord of freedom and the one who brought peace to this nation, King Marco Kane, first ruler of Genosha. Marco sighed again. A simple, he rules this island, would have worked. Steve and Kara exchanged confused looks and Marco sighed again. Blink, go tell the Guardians that they might be needed, then bring my helmet back. As you command, my liege. She smirked before vanishing. I'll explain what happened as we head for this base you came to look at. Marco said. Where is it? 2 kilometers that way. Steve said, pointing away from the city, and Marco nodded. Let's go. Ah, my helmet. Thanks, Blink. We're headed that way, tell the Guardians. Yes, my liege. Blink laughed before vanishing just before Marco could grab her. Cheeky little. Marco growled, then he sighed. All right, how I became ruler of Genosha. It all started after Odin did your cousin a favor and altered the source of my power, making me loads calmer. Superman had the golden armor dude throw me to Earth and I ended up on Genosha, where I came across a group of soldiers setting up to rape the survivors of a village. And when the final warlord was finally defeated, I called a meeting and offered my services protecting this island. Marco finished as they crested the hill. Of course, my life ain't that easy, and before I knew it, they'd made me their king. I tried to talk them out of it, but they insisted, so I set things up so that the Elder Council holds most of the power and responsibility, and all I have to do is say yes or no to whatever they come up with and to lead the army in defending Genosha. And there you have it. For a moment, neither Steve nor Kara spoke, then Steve finally broke the silence. That is quite the story. Liberating an island and becoming its king. You've done well. Never thought I'd end up one, but I kind of like being a hero. Marco grinned. Aha, my Guardians are here. Steve looked up as a metal platform lowered itself to the ground and a dozen soldiers piled off, moving to allow a young barely teenaged girl to walk past them. Polaris, meet Captain America and Supergirl. Captain, Supergirl, my adopted daughter Polaris. The green-haired teen strode forwards fearlessly and shook Kara's hand, then Steve's. Polaris can control metal and can fly. She isn't an actual guardian but tends to be the one who carries them to where they're needed. Marco explained. Half my guardians have powers, the others are trained to counter anyone using powers against Genoshaans. Given time to plan, they could even take me down. The pride in Marco's voice was unmistakable and the soldiers seemed to straighten up at his approval. So, where's the base? I think the entrance is that shack over there. Kara said, checking a small crystal tablet that she had pulled from a belt pouch. Let me check it out, oh shit. Grabbing Steve, Kara leapt back just as a lance of flame slashed through the space that they had been standing. Marco grunted as the fire slammed into him, then he strode forwards, shrugging off the impact. Magneto. I warned you that you weren't welcome here. The remains of the shack collapsed to reveal the entrance to a tunnel leading into the hill it had been set against and several people emerged from it. Chrome. Juggernaut growled in recognition. Lord Magneto is currently otherwise occupied. Ah, let's just kill them. A woman snarled as she stomped into the light, her fists flexing as she glared at the people in front of her. Wait, Frenzy. Greetings Lady Polaris. Chrome said calmly. It is an honor to meet you at last. How, do you know who I am? Polaris asked and Chrome tilted his head slightly. You are the third of Lord Magneto's children. Were you unaware of that? Magneto may have sired her, but she is my daughter. He chose to abandon her, I chose to take her in and I am proud that she chooses to call me father. Juggernaut ground out, placing his arm around the shell-shocked girl and giving her a gentle hug. Polaris, please wait for me at the throne room. Blink, if you could send her. Blink nodded and Polaris vanished. Now, it would seem that we have quite a few of Magneto's acolytes here. Kane continued. Guardians, secure the area. Captain, Supergirl, get ready to lay down the smack. Blink, thin the herd. Her face hard, Blink hurled a veritable barrage of crystal shards at the growing mob before them and whenever they hit, the person vanished in a purple flash. For Genosha. Flanked by the World War II super soldier and the girl from another world, Juggernaut lunged forwards into battle. Is it ready? Yes, Lord Magneto. Tecmage said, looking up from his control panel to meet the gaze of his weakening leader. All is prepared. Magneto nodded and then turned towards the waiting device. Reaching up with a shaking hand, he unfastened his cloak, dropping it to the floor to reveal that he was clad only in a pair of shorts. Taking a step forwards, he stumbled, only to be caught by Amelia Vaught. I've got you, sir. She said as she helped him hobble across to the table-like structure. As she helped him to lie down and secured the armatures into position over his arms, legs and chest, Tecmage nodded. Serum is loaded, Vita Ray projector is charged, we are ready to begin, my lord. Do it. As Mist stepped back, Tecmage hit the first control and the table started to rotate even as the sections attached to the sides rotated into position, transforming it into something that looked uncomfortably like an upright coffin. Beginning injection sequence. Mist swallowed nervously as the racks of blue liquid started to empty. Engaging Vita Ray projector. A muffled cry of agony sounded and Mist spun to stare at Tecmage. It's hurting him. I know. It can't be helped. Tecmage snapped back. Vita Ray's at 5%, 7%. Mist's face twisted with worry as another scream echoed from the device. The blast door that had sealed off the entrance of the tunnel buckled under the first blow, bulged with the second and the third sent it skidding across the floor. Damn, and I thought that I was strong. Juggernaut rumbled, staring at Supergirl in astonishment. I'm suddenly very happy I never had to fight your cousin. Captain America stepped forwards, looking round as he advanced down the tunnel. Behind him, Juggernaut and Supergirl exchanged glances, then they moved forwards to flank him. You have more experience in things like this, you're in charge. Marco stated. Any idea where we are going? Steve shook his head, then paused. Supergirl, your cousin could see through solid objects, could you? On it, was the laconic response as Supergirl narrowed her eyes in concentration. Not many people here, we managed to beat most of them, got them. One of them is in something that looks like a coffin on a stick. They've already started. Steve yelped. Which way? This way. Supergirl said as she flew forwards, the two men in hot pursuit. Shit. Techmage swore as he looked at the screens. They'll be here in a moment. Mist barely spared him a glance as she stared helplessly at the container from which screams of pain emerged, then she spun round as the door to the lab was flattened. 99%. Techmage shouted as he pulled out a gun and opened fire. Supergirl moved to intercept the shots even as Mist leapt at Juggernaut and the two of them vanished into a cloud of vapor. Even as they did so, the whine of machinery faded and Techmage nodded. You're too late, it is done. Yeah, whatever. Supergirl snorted as she plucked his gun from his unresisting hand and crushed it. Steve, what's going on? It's opening. Steve called back, circling the device, then suddenly a pulse of energy slammed him into the wall, trapped by his own shield. An instant later, the far wall exploded and the reinforcing girders slammed into Supergirl, wrapping round her until only her head remained visible. Lord Magneto. Steve's eyes widened as a white-haired man apparently in his 20s emerged from the opening container. The man looked at his hands and smiled. It worked. I'm healed. Lord Magneto. You're young. How? Steve choked as Magneto waved a hand, causing his outfit to fly across to him. Levitating slightly, Magneto smirked as his clothing slid onto him, then he reached out a hand for his helmet before answering. Quite simple. You do not have what I do. The X gene. You would be surprised just how much of a difference it makes. I really must thank you, this is twice now that you have saved my life. Twice. Supergirl managed to ask even as the girders tightened slightly to prevent her from breaking out. Indeed. Magneto said, motioning for Techmage to start closing the lab down. Once when I was young, when he and Logan helped to liberate the camp that I was imprisoned in, and today with this marvelous device that you tested out for me. If not for your example, I would still be on the verge of death due to the effects of the experiments that were performed upon me all those years ago. I wonder. Kara tried to squirm as Magneto twitched his fingers and a piece of metal flowed around a lock of her hair. As it pulled several strands loose, she yelped in pain. A trophy for the future. Magneto smirked as the metal-wrapped hairs attached themselves to his belt. Now, where is, delivery for Magneto? Juggernaut sneered as he re-entered the lab with Mist's unconscious form held in one hand. The others are in prison by now. Hang on, weren't you wrinkly earlier? Magneto donned his helmet, then waved his arm and Juggernaut dropped Mist as he reflexively shielded his face from the flying shards of metal. Supergirl redoubled her attempts to escape as the rest of the loose metal gathered Mist up and carried her to where Magneto and Techmage were standing before forming a sphere around them, a sphere which punched upwards through the roof. Let me help. Juggernaut growled, pulling the girders even as Captain America dropped down from the wall with his shield no longer holding him prisoner. Okay, can you get us up there? Without bothering to reply, Supergirl grabbed both of their hands and accelerated upwards, pausing at the sight of not one but three spheres heading away in different directions. Which one is he? Steve asked and Supergirl grinned. Please, trust me. As soon as both her passengers nodded, Supergirl spun round, one arm flicking out and then the second before she flew off after the third sphere. Double fastball special. Thanks for the idea, Logan. She grinned as she flew. Mine was a decoy as well. Juggernaut groused. Damned bastard must have created them all as decoys and waited for us to be distracted before escaping. Sir. The prison's been hit, all the new prisoners are missing. Blink shouted as she appeared from her purple flare and Juggernaut sighed. And there's the second shoe. Damn him. Steve and Kara nodded in reluctant agreement. At least we managed to reclaim the equipment. Steve noted. If you don't mind, we'll take it back with us. Put it somewhere more secure. Maybe in Tony's basement. You know, Supergirl mused. We worked together quite well, despite what happened. Didn't you say that there was an opening on the Avengers? Steve's eyes widened, then he started to grin almost manically. Seriously? Supergirl smiled. I demand my own apartment, though, with a balcony. That won't be a problem. Chapter 15, and let loose. What? A room. Alex Masters gushed as he exited the training room. Wow, man. That was, like, the gnarliest set of waves I've ever been on. I'm so staying here. Glad you enjoyed it. Scott grinned as Alex finished toweling his hair. Now, while you were shredding the waves or whatever you call it, Clark and Forge came up with something you might like. Since your powers are so similar to mine, they were able to put together the prototype very quickly. Come and see for yourself. Sure thing. Alex laughed. I mean, you got yourselves holodecks and cookies that taste like paradise and a plane that goes into space, so let's see what else you got. Quite a bit. Scott grinned as he strode down the corridor. And you haven't had a Martha Kent meal yet. Yeah, I am getting hungry. Alex admitted with a rueful smile. So, check out what's waiting then we eat. Indeed. Scott laughed as he tapped the door control and it opened to reveal a large workshop. From his workbench, Forge waved while Clark didn't look up from the conversation he was having on the comm system. So I'm meeting the rest of the team once they return. A female voice that Alex didn't recognize said. Steve's already shown me one of the apartments available and it's great, but could I ask for a training hall for the basement if I choose to join? With the arc reactor powering the tower and quite a bit of the neighborhood, we have more than enough power to spare. I'll come over tomorrow to discuss it. Clark said. Do you want me to break the news? I'm not that far away. Came the laughing reply. I can fly back to visit whenever. True, and since our newest recruit has come in, I'm afraid that I need to end the call. See you tomorrow. See you then, cousin. Clark finally looked up and smiled. Hello, sorry about that. Just dealing with a small issue. Kara's probably joining the Avengers. Really? Scott asked. Wow. Well, I suppose that having a female Kryptonian on the team will allow them to overcome the men's club view that many have about them. Seeing Alex's quizzical look, he sighed. The only woman on the Avengers at the moment is Black Widow, and she doesn't have any actual powers, although she is a fully trained assassin. Supergirl is as strong as Thor, can fly a lot faster and has sharper senses plus more powers. Alex whistled and Clark nodded. Yes, she's as powerful as I am. Now if you'll come over here to the testing range, I'll show you what we made for you. Alex walked over to the workbench and looked at the metallic, fingerless gauntlets. The gauntlets, Mark I. Forge stated proudly. Like your brother's visor, they can externally store your power in projected reservoirs and feed them into your blasts. Since we had so much more area to work with, though, we included a few other tricks. Put them on. Alex slid the gauntlets on and flexed his hands a few times, getting a feel for the devices. The knuckles are reinforced for punching. Form a fist and push some power into it. Alex's eyes widened as the strip of metal over his knuckles glowed with an aura that extended almost an inch. Throw a punch at the target. Taking a stance, Alex threw his fist forwards and gasped as a small crescent of energy sliced outwards, hitting the edge of the target. The more power you push in, the harder it hits. Forge explained. If you surge your power right, you'll be able to knock down a wall from 100 meters away. Now, can you push your power out of your arms as well, or is it just your hands? Try doing your left arm just below the elbow. Alex frowned in concentration, then he almost fell over as a circular energy field started to form over his left arm, only for it to fade out. What was that? Kinetic shield. Clark said calmly. We based it on Captain America's shield. The more energy you push in, the stronger the shield. We'll adjust the input area for better efficiency now that I have the readings. Try your right arm next. Alex nodded and a moment later, an energy blade formed, stretching from behind his elbow to almost 30 centimeters beyond his fingertips. Kinetic blade, should be able to cut through anything near the tips. Forge explained. You'll need to practice to get the use of those down, but they'll give you an advantage in close-range combat when you don't have enough room to charge up a normal blast. Way cool. Alex breathed as the blade dissipated. Shield, sword, boosted punches and blasts. Your blasts won't be as accurate as your brother's, though. Forge warned. He has advanced targeting routines built into his visor with optical subroutines. But he doesn't have these, does he? Alex smirked, the shield and blade forming once again. Oh yeah, these are cool. I can cause real havoc with these. Havoc? That could work. Scott mused and Alex looked at him curiously. Superman, meet my brother, Havoc. Good to meet you. Clark grinned, then he sobered. Now, if it isn't too much trouble, can we check to see that these don't interfere with your normal blasts? Then we can talk uniforms. The newly renamed Havoc grinned. Just a thought, but are there any other ways to store my power? What did you have in mind? Alex struck a pose, grinning at his reflection in the mirror and the glowing chest-mounted disc that served both as extra armor and an external reservoir for his power. Looking good, little brother. Scott said from where he was leaning against the doorframe, and Alex gave a self-conscious laugh as he dropped his pose. Yeah, it does. These boots are cool too. Flight capabilities, wow. Still got to learn how to use them properly, though. Clark was inspired by his friend Tony, also known as Iron Man. Scott grinned, having seen Alex's, abbreviated, first attempt at flight. Apparently Tony overpowered his boots and bounced off the ceiling. Your gauntlets look a bit different. Alex nodded and held up his gauntlets. Version 1.02, boosted efficiency and integrated flight control systems, all linked up to this damn cool visor. 2 upgrades in under an hour. Scott whistled. Nice. Of course, my visor is currently version 6.04. Then again, I've been here since before Clark joined us. Anyway, it's dinner time, so come on and I'll introduce you to the others. Should I get changed first? I wouldn't bother. Scott said as he led his brother towards the elevator. It won't be the first time that one of us has had a meal while still in our deployment outfits. Cool. Alex grinned, looking down at his black bodysuit with the blue steel effect half gauntlets, boots, and belt. I have to say, I look amazing. These look amazing. Garden Creed smirked as he looked at the dozen giant robotic humanoids standing motionless in the warehouse. I see there are some design differences from the original plans. Yes, sir. Trask said. The White Bishop made several suggestions which increased the speed of construction. Since the basic Sentinel is effectively a disposable weapon system, we only armored its internal systems and power core, hence the skeletal appearance. The Decanus has a closer resemblance to an armored human due to the fact that it is programmed with interface protocols and as such, is more likely to verbally interact with humans. The blue and purple armor plating is designed to subconsciously cause people to see it as a noble protector. When we complete the first Centurion, the armor will be red and purple. Weapons. The standard Sentinel is equipped with multiple weapons systems we developed from combat tests with the captured mutants. Sonic disruptors, searchlights, arm-mounted miniguns, restraint goo cannons, and electropulse generators. It is designed to be a match for any 4 mutants simultaneously. The Decanus has electrified wrist tentacles, palm blasters, retractable arm cannons, optical projectors, and thrust boots. This is because more of its internal volume is devoted to control systems and it is not meant to engage directly in combat except to defend itself. Should its escort be destroyed, it is programmed to upload all of its tactical data to headquarters and retreat. Very nice. Creed breathed reverently. How long before the next wave can be constructed? We are building more even now. Trask stated proudly. The next Decanus will be complete within a week and by the end of the month, the first Centurion will be operational. Creed started to respond, but paused as a knock sounded on the door behind them. Yes. The door opened to reveal a worried-looking man in a white coat. Sirs, there's on the news, sirs, you need to see this. And the Avengers are proud to introduce our newest member, Captain America said, his blonde hair being ruffled by the slight breeze as he grinned at the camera, Supergirl. Creed frowned as Supergirl descended into view, landing behind the lectern as Captain America stepped to one side. "Thank you," she said as the applause and cheers slowly faded. "Thank you. I am honored to be invited to join one of the top superhero teams, yes." Minerva Patterson, Daily Bugle. One of the top superhero teams? Who are the others? The first would be the X-Men, led by Cyclops. My cousin works closely with them and I had considered joining them myself. The second is the Henshin Rangers in Japan. Again, my cousin has worked with them and provides them with support, including the protective bodysuits that act as the basis for their costumes. So why did you choose to join the Avengers? Recently, Captain America and myself went on a mission to retrieve some stolen technology. We succeeded and discovered that we work well together. Another alien in the Avengers. Creed sneered. We may need to move our plan ahead slightly. Send a team to capture the mutant. Of course, sir. Trask responded. Whoa. Peter said, rapidly flicking between windows on his computer terminal. Several holographic screens floated around, occasionally switching places with the main screen as Peter's fingers seemed to blur over the keyboard and touch screen. The internet's caught fire over Kara. How so? Charles Xavier asked, extending a plate on which a cookie briefly rested until it seemed to vanish. Peter swallowed the cookie before answering. The Avengers fans are going nuts over Kara. They're trying to analyze her power set based on what they know about Clark and the few times Kara's made a public appearance. Then there's the flame war going on between those who see her as a paragon of feminine empowerment and those claiming that by joining a predominantly male team, she has betrayed the superpowered sisterhood. Fanfiction about her has already started to hit the relevant websites. Oh my, this one has her teaming up with me. What? Avengers, the Spider. I may have to read it myself. Xavier commented, hiding a chuckle as Peter briefly gave him a gimlet stare before returning to perusing the web. A moment later, he paused, staring in shock. Peter, what is it? Peter's fingers flickered over the touchpad, isolating and expanding a small portion of Kara's costume until her belt buckle filled the screen. Ah, that. Xavier realized. Kara saw your design and decided that she liked it. I had meant to get your permission, but with so many other things happening. It's fine. Peter said, collapsing the image. Just unexpected, that's all. Hey, here's a thread about the icon, they've linked it to the X-Men already. What? There's a picture from that rescue mission we did and they think that I'm an X-Man. I really need to do some patrolling to show I'm still semi-independent. I'll have Clark fly you to New York tonight, if you want. Xavier said, hiding his amusement. Appreciated. Peter said absently as he flicked through several more screens of data. Oh man, that's just wrong. Someone's drawing Rule 34 of her. Xavier blinked in confusion. What is Rule 34? Peter sighed. You've never heard of Rule 34? In that case, you don't want to know. Xavier blinked. I'll take your word for it. Check the description for the links to the author.